Hello, ELA students. It's Miss Gok here, and based on Friday's lesson, I realized that the question that I asked for our CER was a little bit challenging, and once I started to sit and figure out why, I realized it's because between Monday and Friday, we weren't able to connect the dots between the lesson we learned on Monday and the writing we had to do on Friday. And there are tons of different reasons for why that might have happened, but what I want to do in this video is show you the connection between what we did on Monday and the writing that I asked you to do on Friday. Hopefully it makes the question a little more clear. And from here, you can break down and assess some example CERs to see maybe how you would answer the question or what the best way to answer the question is. So here is the question I asked you on Friday. It says, in meta perceptions, how do you see yourself? How does the author use the section, what type of person can handle feedback, to describe the value in being reflective about how others see you? Now, there's a lot going on in here, and if you follow my cursor with the red circle around it, I'm going to show you kind of how to break this down so that you know exactly what to write about. Before I do that, though, I want to show you guys where the slip up kind of happened. A lot of you took your eyes and went straight down to this blue section here. And you said, all right, it doesn't matter what they're asking in the top of the question. All that matters is what they are asking here. And this says, describe the value in being reflective about how others see you. So a lot of your brain said, oh, I just have to repeat what Carlin Flores said. And to that, I say nay, that is not what you are supposed to do because you just skipped half the question. Now, I think part of it was because our brains were broken on Friday. It was a long week, it was a long marking period, and a lot of you had just made up a lot of work. That being said, what makes me nervous is that if we get into situations like projects, tests, etc., you'll find yourself doing a similar thing where you think you're taking a shortcut, you read the end of the question, and in doing so, you just missed a whole lot of stuff. So let's start from the beginning and break this down. In meta perceptions, how do you see yourself? Already right there, I know the title of the article is very long. So what I might do if I was breaking this down on my paper is I would cross off this whole title here. I would just cross it out. Sorry, this has become a process. I might cross it out, and above it, I would write the article. At least doing so in your head will kind of make things easier and you're not getting lost in the question. All right, so we know that this means the article. So to take this again, in the article, how does the author use the section, what type of person can handle feedback, to describe the value in being reflective about how others see you? So if you look at the part that I underlined here, how does the author use the section? So they want to know how they used a section. Think about the verb use like you might with a tool. Like, how did you use this tool? Instead of like a screwdriver or a pair of scissors, the tool that the author used was this section. How I explain this to some of the students in class that I was working with is that normally in ELA, we ask you what a text means, okay? Here, we are not asking you what the text means. Instead, we're asking you to go a step further and figure out, how did the author write the article? Like, what strategies did she use to teach you, okay? So we want to know, how does the author use this section to convey this message down here in blue, all right? Basically, the question's telling you, I know what the article is saying, but how do they say it, okay? Now, you're thinking, Miss Gok, when did I learn this? And I'm going to bring you back to this lesson here that we did on text structure. Remember, we said text structure is how a text is written or organized, and we said that the reason that text structure is so important is because it's used to help convey certain points. So if we go back to this question here, they want to know what tools did they use? Like, how was this all organized to convey this certain point, right? That's bullets 1 and 2 here. How was the text written and how was it organized in order to convey those certain points here? That's going to bring me back to this part of that lesson from Monday, right? We talked about 5 types of text structures that authors frequently use. In purple up here, I made a little bit of a joke. Do you remember this? Because sometimes we actually do use these video lessons, all right? The whole point of me teaching you about these 5 text structures was because I was going to ask you which ones showed up in the article. So I think a lot of people said, yeah, Ms. Gawk, we've heard of cause and effect. We've heard of compare and contrast. We know how to describe things. You don't have to go over it. But in doing so, we didn't let these things sink into our brain. So when we read the article, we didn't even consider to look for any of these 5 things. So real fast, I'm going to go over each one super quick, and then you're going to tell me which of these things do you see in that section of the article. Okay, that's what the question's asking you. Which features of text structure can you find in that section of the article? And how does she use these tools to teach us? So remember, sequence is the order of things. If they're speaking in a specific order, maybe they're listing steps in order or something, that's sequence. Cause and effect, because one thing happens or because you do things one certain way, another thing is going to happen, right? The first thing causes the second thing. Compare and contrast. They might list similarities and differences between 2 or more things. That's important to know. Problem and solution is when the author states a problem, and then they might list some possible solutions or ways to fix the problems. And then finally, description is how do you describe things. So in order to answer that CER question, we have to decide, number 1, does the author use any of these text structures here? Number 2, which ones does she use? And then number 3, how does she use them, right? How does it connect to that main idea that was already pointed out to you? So if I were to actually go into this section of the text here, I can tell you that I noticed some text structures right off the bat. Number 1, I noticed description because she goes through and describes how different people kind of handle their own meta perceptions or they handle feedback from others, right? So she says here, people endowed with the trait of physical awareness have a keen sense of how they present themselves. It's describing how people with physical awareness handle feedback. Also down here at the bottom, if you are someone who craves approval, you will tend to think you make a positive impression, and generally you will. It's describing how certain people handle different social situations, okay? So that's where I get description. Cause and effect, remember we talked about if-then statements. If one thing happens, then the other thing is likely to happen. And we have a ton of those in this section. If you're someone who's very curious, your curiosity will drive you to learn new things about the world and yourself, right? So they're saying if you are this type of way, you're going to handle your own meta perceptions in this way. If you're concerned with physical attributes, then you're going to be in control of the impression you give. If you're someone who craves approval, then you will tend to think you make a positive impression. So right off the bat, in these 3 paragraphs, I see 3 examples of cause and effect. If we go further in the paragraph, I might even add that, or not paragraph, if we go further in the section, I might even add that there's some compare and contrast here because they're looking at people with physical awareness, people who crave approval, they're looking at people who regulate their emotions, and then people who are accurately looking at their meta perceptions. So they kind of compare and contrast how each person handles themselves and what kinds of success that will bring, right? So I might even add that compare and contrast is in here. So if I were to answer this question, my claim would be she uses description, cause and effect, and or compare and contrast in this section. Then when I give evidence, I would give examples of these text structures. And then for my reasoning, I would have to explain how these text structures teach us the lesson that it's important to reflect on what others think of you. If you don't connect it back to that theme, then you haven't fully answered the questions. You can't just say, she used compare and contrast, she used description, here are the examples, boom, I'm done. How does she use them to teach the lesson? Let me repeat that one more time. How does she use these text structures to teach the lesson? Okay, so that is all that you need in order to answer the CER question. I hope it made sense for you. In the future, if you're stuck about what to do for a CER, always go back to the lessons that we start the week with, because I promise you they're going to show up in the future. All right.